Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we are diving deep into that weird, tingly sensation in your fingers that might be bugging you, especially in the morning. Let's get right to it.
So, does this sound familiar? You wake up, maybe in the middle of the night, and your hand feels, well, it feels weird. Your pinky and maybe your ring finger are buzzing with that pins and needles feeling, like they've fallen asleep. If you've been wondering what on earth is going on, you've come to the right place. The likely culprit here is something called cubital tunnel syndrome, and it's all about one specific nerve in your arm, the ulnar nerve, getting squeezed or irritated as it passes through a tight little spot in your elbow. You probably know this spot better as your funny bone. And you're not alone in feeling this. Seriously, doctors hear this exact description all the time. It is the absolute classic symptom. That feeling that your last two fingers just won't wake up, especially at night or after you've had your elbow bent for a while. So, to really understand what's happening, we need to take a quick look at the anatomy. It all comes down to the journey of one very important and kind of vulnerable nerve. Think of the ulnar nerve as a long highway for information, starting all the way up in your neck and traveling down to your hand. But along the way, it has to pass through a narrow tunnel at your elbow, the cubital tunnel. And this nerve has two major jobs. First, it gives you feeling in your pinky and half of your ring finger. Second, it controls all those tiny little muscles in your hand that you need for a strong grip and for doing delicate things. So you can see why, when it gets pinched, both your sensation and your coordination can get thrown off. And because that spot at the elbow is so exposed, this is not some rare, obscure condition. In fact, cubital tunnel syndrome is the second most common nerve compression injury in the arm. It's surprisingly widespread, partly because of how we live our lives now, bent over phones and computers, but it often gets confused with its more famous cousin.
So let's clear up that confusion right now. You've probably heard of carpal tunnel, right? Well, that's when the median nerve gets squeezed at the wrist, and it affects your thumb, index, and middle fingers. Cubital tunnel is different. It's the ulnar nerve getting squeezed up at the elbow, and that's what affects your pinky and ring finger. It's a similar problem, just a totally different nerve and a different location. All right, so how does this nerve get so annoyed in the first place? And maybe more importantly, how can you know for sure if this is what you're actually dealing with? Well, the causes are often hiding in plain sight in our everyday habits. Anytime you bend your elbow for a long time, like when you're holding a phone to your ear or sleeping with your arm all curled up, you're actually stretching that ulnar nerve tight across the bone, kind of like a guitar string. Or if you lean on your elbow on a hard desk, you're putting direct pressure right on it. Over time, all that repeated stretching and pressure leads to irritation and swelling, and that's when the tingling starts.
Okay, so you're listening to this and thinking, yep, that sounds like me. What happens next? Usually, it's a trip to the doctor. And honestly, the diagnosis is often pretty clear just from your story and a quick physical exam. Your doctor is going to start just by listening to you describe your symptoms. Then they'll probably run a few simple tests. They'll check the feeling in your fingers, test your grip strength, and maybe do something called the Tinel sign, where they gently tap on the nerve at your elbow to see if it sends a little zing down into your fingers. In more advanced cases, they might even look for muscle wasting in your hand, where the muscles between your fingers can start to look a little sunken in. Now, if the diagnosis isn't totally clear, or if the symptoms are really severe, you might get sent for a nerve conduction study. It sounds fancy, but really it's just a way to measure how fast signals are traveling along that nerve. Think of it like a speed test for your nerve's internet connection. A significant slowdown right at the elbow is the smoking gun. It confirms there's a blockage. But here's the really good news. For a lot of people, especially if you catch this early, you can get better without ever seeing the inside of an operating room. So let's talk about the first things you can do to get some relief. The goal here is super simple. Stop irritating the nerve. That means making some common sense changes. Use a headset or speakerphone instead of holding your phone. Get a pad for your desk so you're not leaning on a hard surface. And a big one, keep your elbow straight at night using a splint. Finally, there are some specific exercises you can do to help the nerve slide and glide more freely. And speaking of splinting, you don't have to get fancy. The whole point is just to keep your elbow from bending all the way while you're asleep. You can buy a special brace, sure, but a simple rolled-up towel wrapped loosely around your arm works just as well. It's a great low-tech solution to prevent that nerve from being stretched all night long. Now, this is what's called a nerve gliding exercise, or sometimes nerve flossing. And the most important word here is gentle. This is not a stretch. You're not trying to force anything or feel a big pull. You're just gently encouraging the nerve to slide back and forth in its little tunnel. If you feel any tingling, back off a bit. The movement should always be comfortable and easy. But what if you've tried all these things and it's just not getting better? Or what if your symptoms are already pretty severe? Well, that's when it's time to talk about the next step. The conversation about surgery usually starts for one of two reasons. Either you've given the non-surgical stuff a real try for a few months and you're not getting relief, or your symptoms have progressed to where you have constant numbness or noticeable muscle weakness. At that point, surgery is often the best way to prevent any permanent nerve damage. The surgery itself is usually quite quick and straightforward. Through a small incision on the inside of your elbow, the surgeon simply cuts the tight band of tissue that's acting like a roof over the nerve, pressing down on it. This immediately opens up the tunnel, giving the nerve more space and taking the pressure off. Sometimes, they might even move the nerve to a new spot in front of the elbow where it can't get pinched. And the recovery is relatively fast. It's an outpatient procedure, so you go home the same day. Your stitches usually come out after about 2 weeks, and then over the next month or so, you'll gradually get back to all your normal activities, sometimes with a little help from a physical or occupational therapist.
Now, this is an absolutely crucial point to understand. We have to set some realistic expectations. Surgery is fantastic for getting rid of the active, irritating symptoms. The burning, the aching, the pins and needles, that stuff often resolves really quickly. But numbness, that's less predictable. If a nerve has been compressed for a long time, waking it back up can be slow, and unfortunately it's not always guaranteed to return to 100%.
So as we wrap up, it really all comes back to this one question. For so many people, the answer is a huge yes. Before things get serious, just rethinking how you sleep or how you hold your phone could be the simple key to letting your hand finally wake up. It's a pretty powerful reminder that sometimes the smallest adjustments can make the biggest difference for your health.